All right. Little get you up right there, huh? Sometimes I do a little boxing move when I hear that song. That's a great song. If anybody needs something to get your heart rate up, listen to the whole song. If you're at the gym or something like that, put your headphones on. It's awesome. It's a great song. But the words are even more important because with God on our side, nothing can stop us, right? So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Rick Smith. And when Pastor Greg decided to go out of town, he'd asked me if I would kick off our new series entitled Great Beards of the Bible. Now, one, I know he's out preaching in Europe and he's talking to a bunch of pastors about that, which I think is cool. But Gilly informed me that the real reason he's not here today is because he can't grow a beard. All right? Now, if that bombed, it was all on Gilly. So I'm going to take credit for that. So in all seriousness, when he asked me, there's a lot of people in the Bible that we can, that did great things, and most of them probably had beards because I can't imagine them having dick rages back then and stuff like that. But when I came down to who I wanted to choose, I decided to choose Elijah the prophet. And, the thing about Elijah is little was known really about him, where he came from. There's not much to say. He just kind of appears in 1 Kings. And what we do know about him is his name means Yahweh is God. And, the Lord is God. And that is significant because, he is a man of God, and he's bold enough to he carries that name. And one thing about him is his boldness. He had no fear. We're going to run through a little bit of it. We're going to run fast through it. Most of you have heard the story about Elijah. I know some of you don't. I'm going to paint a picture of where he came from, what his life was like, and the character that he was. And then also we're going to talk about how we apply what we learned from him in our own lives. So if I tend to talk fast, I'm a little bit nervous. You're just going to have to listen faster. Apologize for that. But it is what it is. So Elijah's time was like 870 to 845 BC, right? And during that time, the king of Israel was Ahab. Now Ahab, he was the most fiercest, evil king that Israel had had to date. Nobody had done more evil things than him up to that point. And he had this wife, and this wife, she was the daughter of a pagan king. Anybody know her name? Jezebel. Very good. Jezebel. And Jezebel was a wicked, wicked queen. And she had convinced Ahab the pagan god Baal was the actual god over all of it, over everything. He was considered the god of rain, the god of fertility. He was almost like, to the Greeks, I think, was it Zeus, and the Romans was Midas, or I get them all confused, but all them other things we learned out in mythology, all them gods, he was kind of equivalent to them. But they truly didn't know God. And so the Canaanites, they would stress out over appeasing Baal, that they would go and they would do whatever it took to make sure they kept him happy. They would sacrifice some things. In fact, to the point they would even sacrifice their own children just to keep this god Baal happy. Make sure there was the crops were in the field, rain was coming. We're going to begin by opening up our Bibles to 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. For those of you who don't have a Bible, there's one in front of you. Should be one in the back of the chair in front of you. Feel free to use that one. And if you want to take that one home, we encourage that. Take it home, mark up on it, highlight it, make notes, dog ear the corners, whatever you need to do. Make sure it gets used. That's what they're there for. We have plenty, and we want to share those with you. In 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1, it says, "Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain." So let me back up and I'm going to digress a little bit. I want to set the scene for you. So in this time, Ahab, like I said, was evil. He was going over, he was killing people. They were sacrificing babies. It was just a bad situation. Elijah, he was just one man. He was just bold. He did whatever God told him to do, he stepped in and did it. In fact, Elijah, he had gone in and told the king that there's going to be a drought, right? So God goes in and he tells Elijah, look, there's going to be a drought. Until I say so, there's going to be a drought. And you got to think about this. They worship Baal, right? And Baal is the god of all fertility. He brings rain. He brings all this stuff. They're fruitful. They're growing crops. And Elijah basically ruins his day. And Elijah leaves and he goes off, and the drought happens. Famine happens. Ahab is like trying to save the animals, save the crops, all this stuff. And about 3 years later, in the third year, God comes back to Elijah, and he says, I want you to go back and approach Ahab, and I'll bring rain to the area. And so Elijah, being Elijah, he's that guy, man. God talks to him, he hears him. He steps out and he goes up there and he runs into Obadiah and he arranges a meeting with Ahab. And they get together, and as soon as you got to understand this situation. At this point, when he declared famine on the earth, or declared a drought in Israel, that Ahab didn't sit good with that. He was walking basically into a situation where it could be death. He was an evil king, and here he just pretty much went against everything that they believed that their God was stood for. So he goes in and he talks to Ahab, and he says, or Ahab says to him, oh, there you are, the troubler of Israel. And Elijah's like, I'm not the troubler of Israel. You're the troubler of Israel, right? Yeah, you're the one who basically got rid of the commandments. You're the one who defied God's house. You're worshiping Baal. You are the troubler of Israel. So it doesn't say really what happened at that point, because the next part, it just goes that but I can imagine that they're kind of going into a little bit of banter back and forth, and they're arguing, and finally Elijah's like, you know what, why don't you gather everybody and bring them up to Mount Carmel? And many of you know this story, but I promise you there's a reason I need to go through it. So you're going through it, so they go to Mount Carmel, and all these people gathered around. You got 450 prophets of Baal, you got 400 prophets of Asherah, and just Elijah all by himself. And he's like, I'm just one guy. He knows it. So I'm just a common person, right? Just like us. So at that point, he tells everybody, look, you have to make a decision. You can't be, you either worship Baal and you're going to worship him, or you worship Yahweh. And then if that's where you're going to go, you got to stick with that. You can't go back and forth. You can't be Pollyanna about your faith. You got to decide. You have to make a decision. And everybody just kind of looked at him like he was crazy, I think. And so Elijah, everybody got silent, and Elijah was like, okay, bring 2 bulls over. And basically they're just going to have a standoff, I guess, for lack of better terms. So basically what he tells them is, you've got to take your bull, you're going to cut him up in pieces, you're going to build a pile of wood, you're going to put your sacrifice bull on there, and you're going to call out to Baal and have him set it on fire. So they did that. The prophets got the wood, and they built it up, and they brought this bull over, and they set it up, and they got in there, and they're like, oh yeah, Baal, blah. They're calling out to Baal, please show us show us that you are God, or whatever they're saying. They're calling out to him, and nothing happens. And the thing about Elijah, he's very, very bold. He's very, very confident in God. He knows nothing's going to happen. So he's just kind of kicking back, watching this whole thing. And how do I know that? Why do I envision it that way? Because in the Bible, it tells us that he even starts mocking them. It says so in there, he says, maybe he's musing himself. He's like, oh, God, whatever. Maybe he's musing himself. Then he says, maybe he's relieving himself. Like, dude, he's in the bathroom. He's not even paying attention to you, right? Or maybe he's on a journey. So here you got, he's like kicking back going, dude, you're God. He's in the bathroom. You want me to go get him? He knows nothing's going to happen, because he knows that he's not really the God. He's not Yahweh. So then finally at about noon, he said, or at noon exactly, is what it says, he starts talking to him, and he gets up and he gathers 12 stones, and he lays them out. And he's got 1 stone for each of the tribes of Israel, right? And he puts this wood down, and he brings the other bull, and they chop it up, and they put it on there. And then he kind of, in my mind, he comes back, right? And again, he's just kind of kicking back, because this guy's confident. He's bold. He knows what's going to happen. And he tells them, you know what? That's not hard enough. Pour some water on it. So they take 4 cups of water, and they pour it on there. He's like, no, you know what? That's not enough water. Pour some more. Do it again. So they take 4 more jugs of water, and they pour it on it. And still, that's not enough water. Let's pour some more. One more time. 3rd time. So 12 jugs of water in total. Little trench around it they built, little moat-looking thing. Water runs down. There's water everywhere. There's no way you can catch this thing on fire, right? no match, nothing's going to light it. So I picture it like this, right? So Elijah stands up and he tells somebody, here, hold my beer. Watch this. Right? Or maybe back then it's like, here, hold my grape juice. Right? But either way, he's got confidence, right? He's like, I got this. And he lights this, he calls upon God, and man, light or fire just flashes down and consumes the whole thing. Not just consumes the entire offering, but also all the wood, the water, everything is gone, just burnt up, just in an instant. I was told earlier there's actually a movie about this, but I've never seen it. Just so you know, if there is, I haven't ever seen it. So, but I know many of us, we look at it and we think, well, you know, that's Elijah. I mean, it's Elijah, the prophet, one of the greatest people of the Bible. I'm not him, right? How can I make a difference? How does this pertain to me? How can I be that bold? I'm not going to be able to call fire out of the sky. And while I don't know that we're trying to call fire out of the sky, I think we could set a lot of hearts on fire. I think we can light the world on fire within our community, how we talk to them. And so, but when you look at Elijah and you go back to that one verse, and you don't need to pick it up, it just says he's a Tishbite from Tisbia in Gilead, right? In other words, he's a regular guy. He comes out of nowhere because he was just a regular guy that appeared in the scene. Regular people just like you, a regular person like everybody out here in the seats and myself. We're just regular folks. You know, he didn't have a pedigree. There was no lineage of royalty. He wasn't a descendant of David. He wasn't a descendant of anyone. He was just Elijah. But he loved God with everything he had, and he trusted God with everything he had. And when God spoke, he stepped out, and he did exactly. Could you imagine at a time when you're the only one? In fact, when he's up on that stage, he tells everybody, I'm just one person. All these prophets here, you know, there's many of them. There's 450 of the prophets of Baal, 400 of the prophets of Asherah, but it's just him, one regular guy making a difference, having them choose. And after that happened, they all fell to their knees and started praising God because they realized that Elijah was right. That's right. So going into that, my point is that we can make a difference if we're bold. If we're bold like Elijah, we can step out. You know, there's times we have people in our lives where we, maybe you have somebody in your life or in your community. Maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a coworker, wherever you're at. When you're talking to them, you can step out too. You can say, hey, I'm strong in my faith. We live in a world right now where God is basically being pulled out of everything that we have. I mean, good is bad, bad is good. You guys know that adage. We live in a society where Christians are being beheaded in some parts of the world. Sometimes, even here in the U.S., it feels like, you know, we're on that track. I don't know if it'll ever get that bad, but it still feels like we're being condemned all the time for nothing. We're the ones that are loving and caring, and sometimes that's to a fault. We don't step out, we don't yell, we don't scream, we don't do any of that because we're Christians, right? We're peaceful people. But one of the biggest things we can do is share our faith with our fellow man or woman and children. In fact, you know, it tells us in the Bible in Mark 16:15, when Jesus, in the Great Commissioning, Jesus comes back and he exposes himself to the disciples. You know, they see him and they know he's alive. And it says, go into the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. So just like the disciples, God's calling us, Jesus is calling us to come out of our shell, to trust him. We believe that he's alive and that he's still living. It's our job, it's our responsibility to go out and talk to people. Now, what does that look like? A lot of people are like, man, that's just not me. What does that look like? Well, let me start by saying I can tell you what it doesn't look like. All right, this is not what going out and professing your, although like we were talking about in the last service, there's a few of us that have people we'd like to do this to, right? You guys are like, oh, not me. Or you too. Sometimes I want to do this to myself. But I'll tell you a funny story. Well, I don't know if it's funny or not, but back in 2002, I was at an ASU football game, And as I was exiting, there was a crowd of people, and we were going through the northeast exit, and there's a big chain link fence. It's like 8 foot tall or whatever it is. Double gates opened up, and I could see a crowd of people, and there's a ruckus going on, and I see signs in the air, and they're bouncing up and down, right? And I can't really tell what it is, but I don't know what they're protesting, but something's going on. And as I get closer and I'm walking toward this gate, I see crosses on top of these signs. And as I get closer, I can see I'm walking by, and then there's all these people, and they're like from here to those seats, but there's a crowd, and it opens up, and there's one guy, and he's looking me right in the eye, and he's yelling and screaming, and he's got veins popping out of his neck and off of his forehead, and he's just yelling at me. He says, Jesus hates you. You're going to hell. Jesus hates sinners. Now, at that time, thank God I was already a Christian, and I knew better, because those of you who know me well enough or have known me for a long time, my fuse is real short. Or it was. Let me say it was back then, okay? So it's not anymore, but it was. And I could feel, man, I could just feel the blood rushing up into my head, probably ear, smoke coming out of my ears, and my face turns red. When I'm angry, I cannot hide it. My face turns red. It's like instantaneous, and it happens only even faster than I can snap my fingers. And as I'm walking through, and I remember getting mad, my first reaction is to go over there and want to be confrontational with them. But real quick, something came over me, and I remember this like it was yesterday, and that is, I was told, just keep walking. Those guys don't represent me. And so I kept walking. And if you come where I come from, that almost makes you kind of a coward. Because my natural reaction was to walk up to them and be confrontational. But I realized, but looking back on it now, that God was keeping me, and that was actually my boldness. Me being bold in my faith was I didn't give in to my natural instinct or the secular way or the enemy. The enemy wanted to give me that confrontation, because what happens when you have that confrontation, nobody wins, because nobody hears each other. Instead, we need to go out, instead of being confrontational with them, we just live our life according to God, but we're proud of it. We don't deny him. We just keep walking. God will deal with them on their own. Maybe he's changed some hearts. I just like to believe that he's changed all their hearts at this point. So part of being bold isn't just going out and hitting people over the Bible like they thought they were doing, but it's self-control and understanding that you're representing Christ at all times. Okay? Another part of being bold, getting involved. I know Pastor Greg comes up here and he talks a lot about volunteers. We love the volunteers. I know he really appreciates it. Anytime you volunteer, if anyone's who ever volunteered here, he'll come up and thank you. And Tara, they both are so appreciative of everybody that volunteers. And what I would suggest is you be bold in getting involved, and whether it's here in the church, but in the community. We do the declaration in our city, neighborhood, city, country, and beyond. And it's so important because we have to reach out to people. We have to reach out to those guys, the kids especially. I'm kind of partial to that. We do volunteer in the children's ministry. And I'm going to give them a plug real quick, because if you want to be blessed, you volunteer in the children's ministry. It's unbelievable. They're kids. Yeah, they get rambunctious, but they love it. And they love meeting new people, and they love having fun, and they love being silly. And it's funny because I look at them and I think, man, why can't I be like that as an adult? We have all this head trash, we have bills to pay. We have all this stress. These kids have no stress. I mean, maybe some of them don't know where they come from, but in that moment when they're over there, when I walk through a parking lot at Tractor Supply, and one of the kids from the children's ministry runs across the parking lot, which scared me because I was afraid of cars would come, and jumps up and hugs me, that was pretty awesome. And that's the blessing you get from it. But it's about taking that step and stepping out and saying, you know what? And people tell me, you're crazy for being in, you must be a glutton for punishment being in the children's ministry. Even people that I know that have worked in children's ministries previously or in other churches. But you know what? There's nothing they can do over there that's going to change, going to make any negative effect. Now, I'm not going to keep plugging them, but just so you know, stepping out and being bold in that, let me tell you, it's so wonderful. And I was nervous at first. But we got Gilly over there, and he does such a great job. It doesn't matter where you are, where you come from, or what you're doing, where your background's been, what mistakes you've made in life, what successes you've had in life. Where you are right now, exactly all your experiences, everything you've done in life can make a difference in somebody else's life that's in the same position. I mean, we're all different, but we all, I'll give you an example. So like me and Gilly were talking about this. Gilly and I are a lot alike in some aspects. Obviously, we're both men. We both love Jesus. We're both Cowboys fans, which makes us high IQ level. He made me say that part. But we're also different. So I'll give you an example. The first obvious thing about our differences is I don't have any tattoos and he has 12,000. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how somebody can sit there long enough to do that. But what's really cool about it is that he can walk into a certain group of people and have instant credibility just like that by the way he looks. And so can I, and so can all of you. If you're bold enough to walk into people, talking to people at work and share your faith, if you're bold enough to say, hey, look at me, I'm a Christian. And you don't have to say the words like that, but people will know. When you get people asking you, do you go to church, they recognize something about you. Don't be afraid to share that with them. Share your experiences, because my thing is I don't believe there's anything as a coincidence. And God put you in that position for a reason. No matter what comes out of your mouth, how terrible, how great, how rehearsed, how unrehearsed it is, that moment when you speak, God's giving you the words that you need to speak to that person right then and there. And I'm guilty of not taking that step. I've done it sometimes. I'm really good at praying with somebody or talking to them, and if they're one-on-one. But if I was at a restaurant and God told me, hey, I think that that person over there needs prayer, it's going to be a little difficult just out of the blue talking to somebody and saying, hey, God told me you needed prayer. But he's told me that before. It doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened, and I didn't do it. And I kind of regret that. There's a person I kind of have mixed feelings about. Overall, I love this guy. I think he's a tremendous voice for Christ. Him and his wife do amazing things. But on the other hand, he's a dodger, and he's a serpent slayer, right? He's slaying the devil on one end and the Diamondbacks on the other. So, he just kills us every time he plays us. But he is a man of God. And if I could take just 5 minutes and have you watch this video, or 3 minutes, that'd be great.
When you're out there in the heat of the moment and you're pitching, it's a big situation. You're saying, don't throw a ball, don't give up a hit, don't walk this guy. The harder you want to control something, the more it gets out of your control. And you want to hit the outside corner with the pitch. If all you think about is, I'm going to hit that, aim it right there, hit it right there, that's the last place it's going to go. But when you have in the back of your mind where you're supposed to throw it, and then just say, I'm going to throw it as hard as I can right at that glove, and just say that, it'll be around there more often than not. If you've done the preparation and the mechanics of everything is there. It's almost the same in life. Like the more you try and grip control your life, the more God's gonna, untangle that from you. He's gonna make things go to where you have to rely on him. When I kind of relinquished all control of my life was the day I got drafted. That was life-changing. That was something that, even talking about now chokes me up, just because it's just amazing the providence God had in my life. God was there the whole time. I just didn't bother to look. I never thought in a million years I'd ever get to play professional baseball, get to play in the major leagues, get to live out my dream. Since I was a kid, that's all I ever wanted to do. But, at the same time, if you're playing baseball, why are you playing baseball? Is it to have good success on the field and be a Hall of Famer or whatever it is? Sure, that's everybody's goal. But then what? For me, it's about the legacy you leave off the field. It's about how many people can I affect through the platform that he gave me. I got to go to Africa last year with my wife, Ellen. She's been working with some kids over there that she's gotten to go back and see. One particularly has touched her heart, and her name is Hope. And she's a double orphan. Both her parents have died from AIDS. You see the cloud in her eyes, she's scared. Ellen just gave the quickest version of the good news that she possibly could. And that's all it takes for people in Zambia. It's like they've been waiting their whole lives for somebody just to tell them. And it changed my life. Playing for the Dodgers in LA is just saying that. It's amazing. It's ridiculous. the prayer I say before I go out there and pitch is, not God, let me win today, or God, help me pitch good. It's, God, just be with me. With all the different people and different cultures and different religions, you can kind of just kind of become one, one with the crowd. You got to keep reminding yourself that you're supposed to stand out and you're supposed to be different and you're supposed to act boldly in your faith. It's definitely not easy, not a great conversation starter sometimes, but it's worth the fight. Whether it be pitching on a baseball mound or living my life outside of the baseball field, it's giving up my life to God that really puts my life in control. My name is Clayton Kershaw, and I am second.
So what legacy do you want to leave? He talks about leaving a legacy. There's people out there, Africa, there's people in the United States never heard of Christ. How bold can we be in the church and in this local church, local community, Wickenburg, Arizona, how bold can we step out? So, there's another side of this too. Because of people that were, when you're bold, you make a difference in people's lives. And I'm going to tell you, I think I'm pretty bold when I share my faith with people. I think I still have a lot of ways to go. I don't know if I'll ever quit working on it. But I can tell you I've received on the receiving end, it's even greater, because if it wasn't for people that were bold in their faith before me, I likely wouldn't be here today. So when I was a little kid who lived in West Texas, I had a great aunt and uncle that lived across the street, and they loved God with everything they were. And I would walk across the street every Sunday morning, and I would go to church with them Sunday morning, Sunday night, and then again on Wednesday nights. And I'm little, I'm like 4 or 5 years old. In West Texas, you can walk across the street when you're 4. If you're old enough to walk, you can just walk over there. It's no big deal. I don't want you guys to freak out, like, oh my God, we're your parents. That's just the way life was. In fact, one time I was out on the highway trying to rope a semi as it was going by. Don't tell my mom I told you that, she'll have a heart attack. But because they planted the seed, and why that was so significant, which I didn't know until actually just a few years ago. See, when we moved back to Arizona, economy was tanked, there was no money. It was a tough situation. I was a rebellious kid. I was one of the worst adolescents you could ever meet. You think of the most worst adolescent you know in your life, and I was probably 10 times worse than him. I'd said things, did things to people that loved me unconditionally that I could never take back. I thought I could do this a second time without breaking down, but it's tough. My grandfather died. I have a grandmother who loves God unconditionally too, and she's bold in her faith. In fact, I remember when we moved back here and we'd be visiting, and she'd be in her room. She'd sneak away for about an hour, and we all knew she was in there praying, but we really didn't know what for. After my grandpa passed away, I had lunch with my grandma. And she had shared with me that she had been praying for me. Now, by this time, I'd already become a Christian, and I've turned my life around. But I think because of her prayers that I'm able to stand up here today and even breathing. You see, because when you do the things that I did, sometimes you don't get chances. And maybe you have somebody in your life like that needs prayer. Or maybe that person isn't there yet, and your prayers will prevent that person from going there. It's such a wonderful feeling knowing that people were bold enough to pray for me. They could have written me off. They could have been done with me. And they didn't. And for one reason or another, God led me here today just to share that portion with you. If there's anything you take away from this whole entire message, don't take away me fumbling through the beginning, because I was trying to use some notes that I shouldn't be using anyways. Just take away from the fact that You can make a difference in somebody's lives. Somebody out there needs you. And the most loving act you can do for anyone is to share the gospel with them. Please bow your heads and pray with me. Lord, we thank you so much for all the blessings that you've given us. Lord, we just ask that you guide us this next week and the rest of our lives. Lord, just ask us that lead us to be bold for you, Lord, that we can share the gospel and we can make a difference in everyone's life, Lord. With the Great Commission comes, you need everybody out there sharing your word, Lord. As you tell us, there's so many lost souls out there, and we live in a society, God, where everything seems to be falling apart around us, and a lot of times we don't want to be involved, Lord. And I just ask that you touch each one of our hearts and just speak to us and tell us where we need to be at, Lord. Where do we need to do to be bold in your faith, in your message, Lord? Whether we're at business, in our business workplace, whether we're at the local restaurant, whether we're down at the roping arena, where we're out running around in the desert and we come across somebody, when you tell us to reach out to somebody, we reach them. We reach out to them and share our experiences. Lord, we just ask for prayers for Pastor Greg over there. Just be with him as he's speaking to all these pastors. I mean, what a blessing that is to be able to speak to your own peers, and that you speak through him and that they hear what they need to hear from you. Just want to pray for favor over everybody in our congregation. And we thank you, Lord, and we love you, and we praise your name. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.